Welcome back to Hardball. Florida Senator Marco Rubio is scrambling right now to undo the damage of a Washington Post report that he embellished his family history to benefit politically. Rubio has peddled the story for years that he's the child of parents who fled Cuba sometime after Fidel Castro took power in 1959. But the Washington Post uncovered documents showing that Rubio's parents actually arrived in the United States in May of 1956, 2.5 years before Castro. That makes them expats, not refugees from communism. What does it make Rubio? That's a great question. Manuel Roy Franzia broke this story for the Washington Post, and Joe Conason is editor-in-chief of the nationalmemo.com. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I want to show you something now that really puts it in perspective. This is clear-cut. For a long time, Marco Rubio, once considered a possible VP nominee this coming year for the Republicans, has made it clear that he's one of those people who comes from an anti-communist past, a Cold War past. His parents left Cuba because a communist stole that country, Fidel Castro, which of course occurred. But his family left well before that. Here he is bragging on who he is, and he ain't. American Bridge 21st Century has put together a montage of Rubio's statements about his family history. Let's watch.
I think that the direction that we're going now in Washington, D.C. would make us more like the rest of the world and not like the exceptional nation that my parents found when they came here from Cuba in 1959.
Your father came here from Cuba?
My parents both did, yes.
Came here from Cuba.
1959. And my parents and grandparents came here from Cuba in 58, 59.
As the son of exiles, I know firsthand that it's possible to lose your country. I was raised by exiles, by people who know what it is like to lose their country.
And no matter what titles I may achieve in my life, I will always be the son of exiles.
Well, that's pretty clear-cut, Manuel.
It is. You know, I got into looking at this because I'm working on a biography of Senator Rubio for Simon & Schuster, and came across some documents that had that 56 date, and I was skeptical at first. I thought it could have been a typo. 6, 9, 56, sure. 59 could have been a mix-up. But there was one document after another that had the exact same date, and it was clear that that was when they came.
I've caught politicians doing this, lying in their resume to make themselves look like something they're not. What happened when did you confront them, or how did you confront his people? How did you get him to deal with this, or did you get him to deal with it, this dishonesty?
I talked to Senator Rubio's staff. They invited me over to their office to look at some passports, copies of passports. They didn't want me to take them with me, but they said that I could look at them. And what was interesting about the passports is that they showed that during this period between 1956 and 1959, the Rubio parents were in Miami all the time.
Okay. Then you put Joe Conason, what do you make of this? Because we've got a lot more documentation to show you here about this ruse that went on here to make him look like a real anti-commie. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I've seen Senator Rubio give different dates for when he knew his parents came over, or when he said his parents came over. At different times, he's given different years for when his parents and grandfather came. And you know, I think most of the children of immigrants have a pretty clear idea of when their families came to the United States and under what circumstances. I mean, it's easy to imagine little Marco growing up and saying to Mommy, what was it like under Castro in Cuba?
Yeah.
And why did we leave? And Mommy probably saying to him, well, we weren't really there then, son.
How could you not have had that conversation? What was it like when Castro took over?
Yeah,
I mean, everybody who saw Godfather 2 knew what that was like. Why would you ask your parents, what was it like when Castro, what did he do? Did he shoot? I noticed he shot 600 people. What was that like? Do you know any of them?
Right.
You'd always ask that stuff.
It's like the immigrant Jews or the Irish not knowing about the potato famine or the pogrom. I mean, you know, this is part of the immigrant mythos, and if you didn't hear that way as a child, then you're missing something. So it's hard for me to believe that he didn't know the real circumstances.
Well, I don't think it's that fuzzy, Joe. You're being a little kind here around the edges, unusually for you. But look at this: a biography of Rubio, and his own website leaves no wiggle room as to when the Rubio family came to the U.S. It reads, quote, In 1971, Marco was born in Miami to Cuban-born parents who came to America following Fidel Castro's takeover.
Right.
Following Fidel Castro's, that's his own official document. We should also note that the same wording can be found in the biography, which appeared on the Senate campaign website back in 2010. So he keeps putting out this falderall, this cover story, and over again. Now, look, here's, I'm going to give the judges a chance to respond to this, but I think this makes them look even more foolish. When you're caught, you ought to admit you're caught. He doesn't admit he's caught, Manuel. When you caught him, he lashes out at you. Here he is, lashing out at the reporting in the Washington Post, calling it outrageous. In a statement yesterday saying he won't stand for it, he lashed out again, writing in Politico, quote, here's what the senator said in his cover: if the Washington Post wants to criticize me for getting a few dates wrong, I accept that. But to call into question the central and defining event of my parents' young lives, the fact that a brutal communist dictator took control of their homeland and they were never able to return, is something I will not tolerate. Ultimately, what the Washington Post writes is not that important to me. I am the son of exiles. I inherited 2 generations of unfulfilled dreams. This is a story that needs no embellishing. Then why did you do it? How can people put out this pompous, indignant nonsense when they're caught dead to rights?
Well, I don't know if I would use those exact words, but I will say this. There is an interesting story whether they came before or after Castro. In fact, in some respects, if they came before Castro, it's an immigrant story that would be understood by a lot of people in the United States right now. Millions of people in the United States right now who came here looking for economic improvement, a better life, all of these things that we hear when we hear interviews on the Mexican border, for instance. And it appears that based on the timing of this, that the motivation would have very likely been for the Rubio family to come here and find work and have a better life, all those same reasons. But it's not the narrative that the senator's comfortable with.
This is obviously, Joe, very ideological, not so much ethnic, because he's already Cuban-American. He didn't have to argue about that. That's a fact on the record. But he had to be part of this right-wing struggle against communism. He has to appeal to the Tea Party types. It seems like what's going on is an attempt to foist an unfactual history to win over the approval of right-wingers across the country.
Yes, of course. He wants to cloak himself in that history, Chris, and in that ideology. And I guess that's okay. The problem is that it's not true. And the second problem is, that Senator Rubio has had other integrity questions raised about him in the not-so-distant past, about his use of credit cards, Republican Party credit cards. The former party chairman went to prison in that same scandal. And, this is not Rubio's only problem, and I think it's a good day today for anybody else who wants to be on the vice presidential slot and the Republican ticket next year.
It's a decent day for Chris Christie, and probably a better day for John Thune, who's my long shot. Anyway, thank you, Manuel, for breaking a big story for the Washington Post. You ought to get some kind of Pulitzer for that anyway. And Joe Conason.